Friends, I welcome you to my channel. Before listening to this story, I will ask you to like and subscribe. It is not difficult for you, but it is pleasant for me. And we're starting. The evening went much better than she expected. Eva Terry and her beau hosted a gourmet dinner in South Beach, Miami. It wasn't so much the dinner as the company she shared. Braxton Peregrine admired Eve, even felt lust for her. She was a middle-aged woman who ran the family perfume business he worked for. Braxton, at the age of 24, had just joined the firm as an entry-level accountant. This year, Eva singled out Braxton from the herd of new employees, as she often did when looking for a new partner for games. She was tired of her husband, even though they had been married for a little over 2 years. He kept to himself as the financial director of the family business. According to Eva, he was boring but stable. He was good for messing around once or twice every few weeks, but according to Eva, nothing more than maintenance. Eva's husband, Martin, was 6'2" and tall and fit. He was in good shape after his daily swim, but according to Eva, nothing special. She never criticized his good looks and was actually proud to be his wife alone with her friends and close associates. But he lacked the persona of a frontman for any public appearance needed to sell the brand. He had neither style nor talent. He was much better off backstage. That's probably why she married him. She needed financial management, as well as the love and support of a good person to succeed. It wasn't that she didn't love him, but she needed a younger man. Eva was the penultimate representative of sachet fragrances. Constantly in the spotlight of television commercials and magazine publications, even at the age of 45, she occupied a wide niche both in business and in her personal life. She had a model appearance with her brown hair, perfectly applied makeup, and stylish clothes. She looked like a younger version of Andie MacDowell. Her afternoon dates leading up to her wedding to Martin were carefully hidden. Braxton was her new attempt at a new lover. It was their first date and her first marriage romance. Braxton, of course, was checked by her personal security team. They did an extensive background check to root out any of his personal secrets, just like she did with all the other young people in her life. So far, apart from one unsuccessful long-term relationship in college, he seemed spotlessly clean. He might have been bribed for that matter, but on the whole, he was untainted. How refreshing, Eve thought as she read the report. However, Eve intended to investigate Braxton not only in the report. For an accountant, he was extremely charming. He was respectful to her when one afternoon she accidentally went into the accounting department to check something with Martin, which attracted her at first. He was very handsome, broad-shouldered, in a fashionable suit. He was optimistic and fashionable, unlike her husband Martin, who seemed to be wearing suits made in the 80s. Martin married Eva because he was in love with her. Of course, it didn't hurt that he thought she was the most beautiful and intelligent woman in the world. She was a very influential CEO in the competitive perfume industry. She seemed to be as much in love with him as he was with her. They dated for almost a year before he knelt down and proposed to her. She immediately replied, "Yes." Martin had no intention of working for her, but when they got engaged, it seemed to him that now was the right time to immerse himself even more in the business. The business was trying to convert some of its long-term debt into private equity. Martin proved to be an invaluable assistant, completing the deal without any problems. He was very proud when Eva named him the CFO of Sachet Fragrances and honored him with the title of her husband. Of course, he knew about her affairs with the young men before their engagement. They even discussed it for a long time before the engagement and subsequent marriage. Eva assured him that all such connections had stopped. After all, she hadn't been married before, so her past affairs weren't anyone's business. Deep down, Martin suspected that she might continue her affairs with young men, but hoped that this would not happen. Despite his misgivings, he continued their marriage. He was willing to trust Eve and ignore her past behavior, but he was also preparing for the future if Eve developed a sense of debauchery again. He made it clear to Eve that fidelity to marriage was paramount to its continuation. He was 39, and she was 43 when they got married. During the first year of their marriage, they recreated their honeymoon with long marathons almost every weekend. Both Martin and Eva never seemed to want anything more. Martin, of course, suspected his lovely wife of continuing her spontaneous dates, but he never confessed these feelings to anyone and did not admit to Eva. Of course, he could never prove or disprove their existence. In fact, it was just a feeling based on Eve's past behavior. At the beginning of their second year, Eva showed signs that the hot romance with Martin was cooling down. Martin again mentally doubted her loyalty, but of course he could not prove anything. Eva, as CEO, held everything and had access to everything, including unlimited access to all systems, both personal and private. There couldn't be any secrets that she didn't know or couldn't find out if she wanted to. The house they lived in was quite large for the two of them, over 5,000 square feet. If it were up to Martin, they would save the money spent on the house along with cleaning and upkeep, and pocket it for 401k or other deferred investments. He would be happy in a condo. He didn't need such a house just for the two of them with such a grandiose environment teeming with a cook, a maid, and a butler. However, he enjoyed visiting their pool every day. It was an indoor and outdoor pool, opening out through a clear glass partition on the grounds of their immaculately maintained Miami home. The pool located inside the house was modern and immaculate. The outdoor pool was a luxurious small pool with a built-in hot tub heated by solar panels. The pool was extravagant, but Martin thought it was worth it. He carefully maintained it every week through testing and chemical additives as needed. There was no need for pool maintenance or a cleaner to maintain the pool. He paid special attention to the pH of the pool so that the water would not turn green, like in the high school and college pools that he remembered. It was the beginning of the new year of fragrances, which began in June this year, that attracted the attention of the media. The company has just released a new fragrance ahead of the consumer hype that accompanied the start of the holiday season in the fourth quarter, which captured everyone's interest. The fragrance has become a hit of the season. Several celebrities picked up on the line and started advertising it during the summer months. When commercials and print ads featuring Eva as a model were shown at the end of September, the product took off like a rocket. It was probably because of this rocket effect that the wheels fell off the notorious marriage wagon. Eva had never been home, but she felt at home in her element everywhere. She constantly promoted the product line. There were weeks when Martin didn't see her. He reasoned at the time that it was just a business, but still harbored the belief that Eva was not unshakable in her commitment to monogamy. He could never tell exactly who and when, but he strongly suspected something. She was too beautiful a woman not to attract male attention. He followed the financial aspects of the business and knew the frequency of sales enough to be sure when a new hit was on their hands, but decided that he needed to take some measures regarding his personal life. He could not decide which course he should take. When Eva finally returned after Thanksgiving from her 30-day roadshow, as she called it, she was completely exhausted. She slept in their bedroom for almost 36 hours. Attentive to her needs, Martin showered her with love and tenderness. It seemed almost unreal to him. His wife, with whom he had lived for a little over 2 years, was a mystery to him. Beautiful but terribly needy during periods of depression. She demanded attention, but at the same time enjoyed the care Martin gave her in the comfort of their own home. As he took care of his wife, his sense of deception decreased a little. Martin knew that her hectic travel schedule was coming to an end, as the holiday season was nearing its end. He was looking forward to the Christmas holidays with his wife to rekindle the embers of passion that had died down since the beginning of summer. Of course, Martin kept in touch with his wife while she toured the United States and Europe promoting the new line, but he was constantly tormented by doubts about her loyalty. While she was away on business trips, Martin installed micro cameras all over the house. Their location was even a secret to him until he watched their channels one evening before Eva returned. Even then, with cameras capable of tracking, zooming, and focusing on a target, it was almost impossible to pinpoint their exact location. One evening, after installing the cameras, he actually saw himself entering the front door and was able to see that his fly was actually half unbuttoned. Although he was embarrassed, he thought that the cameras would undoubtedly capture any intrigues in their house. The video quality was amazing, but the sound quality sounded even better. Together, they obviously created a first-class security system. Martin had long suspected that Eva had affairs while traveling, but could not rule out that they took place in their house. This timid move to monitor the house was Martin's first attempt to figure out her affairs, or get more information about whether they were happening somewhere else. Their schedule was such that they rarely had lunch or saw each other after work, so Eva could easily slip home for lunch with anyone. Each room in their house was connected to its own system of 3 cameras, with a backup battery in case the power was turned off. The video stream was sent over the internet to a central computer in the cloud. Each camera had its own memory card capable of storing 24 hours of video and audio. All of them were wirelessly synchronized with the main computer in the cloud, to which only Martin had the password. Special software made it possible to view images from each room on split screens or to click and scale any specific tape. She was elegant but simple. It was just Martin's careful way of planning ahead for anything that might happen. A video showing the CEO caught in the act with a lover would make tabloid magazine editors drool if they found out about his existence. Martin hoped that one threat would be enough for Eve to understand what this could lead to. After the holidays, when Eva was absent for dinner several times, Martin felt uneasy again. He was glad he had cameras. They enjoyed an amazing Christmas with gifts galore and a love life as if they were back on their honeymoon. When they returned to work after the holidays, Martin's senses picked up on the change with Eva, but the cameras and sound showed nothing but love and affection as Martin browsed through the files daily. Eva asked him to visit the factory in China at the end of January to make sure that their documentation and quality control meet the company's standards. Martin suspected a trick in her request, but bit his tongue and agreed. The trip was supposed to take about 2 weeks, of course, long enough for Eva to engage in love games. This time, however, he thought, I have cameras. This was not unheard of for her, but Martin, now even more alert, was glad that the cameras were installed. After Martin left for the East at the end of January, Eva had her own plans. She planned to invite Braxton to dinner again tonight, but at her home, not at one of the trendy restaurants in South Beach. She didn't believe she really needed to seduce Braxton, as he had given her all the right signals at their last dinner. She liked it when lovers came to her. It gave her a sense of control and power over the situation. Braxton knew he wanted Eve, and he was determined to get her. Her husband, his boss, was an inferior being as far as he could tell. He certainly wasn't physically intimidating, and obviously he couldn't satisfy an older woman's lust. He thought he was the best man himself to make her scream like a little girl. His dignity was greater than most, and the way he handled it never made a woman want more when he was done. He saw it not only as his ticket to nirvana, but also as a ticket to the boss's chair if he played his cards right. Once he satisfies the more mature Eva, he will be able to get a ticket to the CFO's office with her blessing. Eva called Braxton to her office in the middle of the day after Martin's early departure. Braxton wasted no time, and a few minutes later he was waiting in the waiting room until Eva's assistant allowed him to enter. Eva liked her men to act quickly and follow orders at her time and at her choice. Braxton, thank you for your prompt response. I'll get right to the point. Could you join me for dinner at my house tonight? I would like to get acquainted with the sales figures of our new fragrance for the last quarter. Please arrive on time at 7 and bring the sales schedules. You're welcome. And yes, I will definitely bring all the sales figures. From what I've seen, you've done very well with the promotion. Well done, Mrs. Terry. Thank you, Braxton. Please call me Eva when it's just the two of us, as it will be tonight, while we have dinner and review the numbers. Please get the address from my assistant when you leave. Braxton was surprised. He was a little worried that there was no more flirting, especially since their last date went so well. Perhaps she needed to keep an eye on the office environment to avoid the possibility of being discovered when someone dips a pen into her inkwell. Anyway, Braxton knew what was going to happen tonight. She wanted him. He felt it when she licked her lips several times while she was talking. She casually twirled a small lock of hair from the bottom of her neck in her fingers as if it were a bait. She looked like a tigress who twirls her tongue while looking at a moose. It was just Eve's way of being very careful not to draw attention to herself. A whole security service was attached to Eva, who watched her every move. They did it electronically and physically. Martin did not know that she checked the house monthly for electronic devices, but he was well aware of her physical safety. Her guards discovered the intricately placed cameras shortly after Martin installed them. In Eve's opinion, exposing them was a waste of time. Instead, after learning about them, she asked if they could be temporarily defeated, as she did not want Martin to know that they had been discovered. This, she thought, worked to her advantage by controlling the information. She could use his own observation to prove her virtue. Martin would never suspect anything. Its chief security officer advised against disabling them, as it could cause more concern when something is discovered. However, he provided a device that, in fact, jammed the wireless transmission of cameras, which led to the appearance of the snow-white picture he mentioned. She wondered to herself what Martin might actually have said. "Honey, I know you're cheating on me, but my cameras must be malfunctioning, so I have no proof." Eve laughed out loud. Her laugh was angry. She ordered a silencer to be installed. Returning home at 4:30, Eva relaxed in the main bathroom, reclining with a glass of Chardonnay. She allowed the relaxing impulses of the jets, warm water, and bubbles to bring her to a feeling of euphoric bliss. At 5:30, she went out and put on a bathrobe. Eve was completely relaxed. She had already instructed the chef to cook dinner and wanted to make sure everything was going according to plan. Besides, she needed to replenish her wine supply. She could have called the butler, but she preferred to do it herself. "Martha, is everything ready for dinner tonight?" Eve asked as she entered the kitchen. She saw a table set for two in the next dining room, with candles as she had asked. The interior of the room was thought out perfectly. To begin with, they will have lobster soup, a crispy salad with blue cheese, and baked Chilean sea bass with almond beans as a main dish and side dish. It was one of Eva's favorite dishes. The fish had a lemon rosemary aftertaste that went well with the wine she chose. Martha outlined to her everything that was in the kitchen. All the food was cooked. Eva just needed to turn on the ovens and burners at the appropriate time. Dinner would be sumptuous. Eve was sure Braxton wouldn't mind helping her put some plates on the table as they sipped wine while dinner was being prepared. Eve was in a devilish mood tonight. It was all so decadent, she thought. Around 6:15, she decided to go back to the bedroom to get dressed for the evening. She clicked on the remote control, which emitted a soft beep indicating that all of Martin's cameras in the house were turned off. For any curious eye or camera, they would have seen snow. Dinner with a new client was on her calendar. Now that the cameras were off, another scene was about to play out. Sipping her wine and looking at her closet, she decided what to wear. It was too stuffy in a business suit. The short skirt was too slutty and did not suit a woman of her height, but her new red dress with heels and pearls would be perfect. She bought this dress in Paris during a promotional tour. It was one of a kind. She was glad she was in the right place at the right time to buy it. Then she chose underwear and decided to pamper Braxton, pulling on black nylon stockings over perfectly smooth legs. What would Martin think if he saw her like this? Hot as the night in the jungle, gushing like a fountain, wanton as a fool in the heat. Perhaps Martin would have accepted the challenge, but she put those thoughts out of her mind. She was sure that Braxton was a lion ready to mate, and expected him to take her several times in her own marital bed. She had never thought about the consequences of her decision to take a lover as a married woman. She felt almost no guilt. She felt entitled. She finished dressing just as the doorbell rang, shortly before 7. Her boy was punctual. It inflamed her ego and libido, knowing that she had control over it. She casually went downstairs. The cook and the butler had long since left, according to her orders. Braxton looked ravishing in his light blue shirt with 3 buttons undone, paired with a handsome dark blazer and navy trousers. His shoes shone as if he had just polished them. His black hair looked neatly trimmed. His steel gray eyes were strained when she opened the door. Eve had to pinch herself, thinking that today he was all hers. But dinner and sales figures should come first. She invited him in. He brought a bottle of wine and flowers, which really warmed her up a lot. She was not used to such an intimate gesture. No one but Martin, her loving husband, had ever thought of bringing her flowers. It touched her. None of her novels before her marriage had any elements of romance, which she admits was exciting. She offered him a drink, which he kindly declined in favor of sparkling water. She poured herself another generous helping of Chardonnay, which was supposed to be the wine of the evening. She started to heat up the soup and checked Martha's instructions one last time to make sure everything was in order. Martin landed in Tokyo, Japan, and was waiting for his relatively short flight to Beijing, China, when his phone alerted him. He walked up to the boarding gate on his last flight to China and decided to sit down with a drink to examine it. The alarm came from the cameras. While he was looking at the details, the cameras reported a malfunction. He tried to access the main server and found that the channel from the cameras to him was disabled. Puzzled, he called up an additional screen on the cameras. According to the app, they had energy, but the only signal they were transmitting was white snow. Frustrated, Martin pressed every button in the app, trying to find the cause of the problem. He even went to advanced, having never tried it before. In a rage, he hit the button several times, but to no avail, almost breaking the phone in the process. At the most inopportune moment, the cameras could not be analyzed. He refused the application and accepted that he would personally talk to a security representative who sold the equipment as bulletproof and demand a full refund. Eva and Braxton enjoyed soup, salad, and snacks while looking at the sales figures over a good dinner. Braxton had a glass of wine at dinner, but nothing else. Eve wondered if he really didn't like drinking alcohol. It doesn't matter, she thought. If he could play half as well in bed as he did at dinner, he'd be worth it. During dinner, she took off one of her high-heeled shoes and casually ran her stockinged foot over Braxton's ankle. Her seduction was blatant, but she firmly felt that Braxton had read it appropriately. He looked a little scared at first, then smiled and pointed to the bottom line of the profit for the new fragrance. She smiled back. It was like a game of cat and mouse. She was a cat. Braxton. You're interested? Older women? What is it? She asked, putting on her high-heeled shoes again. Only if the older woman is you, Eve, he replied casually. Well, since we're looking for a common interest, maybe we should retire to my bedroom. I mean, I'm starting to get a little tired. It's been a long day, and I'd like to see the sales forecasts for the first quarter. What about your husband? What is it? He asked quickly. Martin? She glanced at her watch. He's due to board his flight to Beijing soon. She said it easily. Lead the way, my love. Braxton took her hand. When they reached the master bedroom, Braxton stood in awe. All one-of-a-kind designer fleurs of fabrics, paintings, furniture, and equipment to satisfy the CEO. Ava was sitting in a wing-backed armchair in the small living room, away from the bed. She crossed her legs and rocked one of her high heels. Please help me take off my heels, Braxton. She said it in a playful tone, but Braxton interpreted it as an order to kneel at her feet. He was ready to play along until the time came. He took off his jacket and put it on another chair opposite her. He kicked off his shoes and readily bent down to serve the princess as she asked. He swore that this temptress would submit to his will before the end of the night. Kicking off her shoes, Eve turned around. Braxton easily unzipped her back, exposing her creamy shoulders and back. When Eve's dress slipped into a puddle at her feet, she spun around. Braxton took her in his strong arms and kissed her hard, piercing her mouth deeply with his tongue. She responded in kind, and he received the first of many electric shocks as Eve shuddered, enjoying the taste of her young lover. As they continued to kiss passionately, Eve unbuckled Braxton's belt and trousers. She broke off their kiss and carefully pulled them, along with his boxers, to his feet to avoid his erection, which almost hit her on the nose as she guided them down. Braxton was no longer than her husband, but he looked a little fatter, she noticed. Her thighs began to tingle at the sight of his manhood. Braxton, left in his shirt sleeves, stood in front of Eve's admiring eyes. She tore open his shirt, scattering buttons everywhere, revealing his taut abs and well-developed chest. Eve jumped back when a pair of buttons hit her. Braxton picked her up and threw her on the bed. Eve couldn't help but sigh as Braxton jumped onto the bed next to her. They hugged each other. Braxton's muscular arms wrapped around her. She felt wanted. She felt the need for her partner when his hot groin ruthlessly poked into her stomach as they kissed. Braxton was burning with lust as he unbuttoned Eve's bra, casually throwing it on the floor. His gaze became even sharper and more piercing. Eve giggled. He immediately plunged into her cleavage, causing Eve to tremble and get goosebumps. She made a shrill sound, but Braxton continued his manipulations, forcing Eve to scream one more time before she pushed him away. I need you now, Braxton. You are welcome. Take me. She was breathing heavily from disappointment. As you wish, he replied. Eve was more than ready. Braxton's smile was pleased, the satisfaction of having done everything Eve could have wished for, and even more. Now it was his turn. He slowly moved away and began to move evenly so that Eve could get used to it and descend from the heaven of bliss. It didn't take him long to accelerate the tremors. That's why I like young guys, she thought. Braxton was almost more than she could handle. Almost. She vowed never to underestimate him again. He would be a great choice for something more than just a chance meeting in the middle of the week. Perhaps, she thought, he could be the long-term lover she really needed. The thought of a long-term lover made her blush and tremble with fear. She was tormented by guilt. It was her first novel after her marriage. She was no longer a lonely socialite who had no worries and no husband. Now she really believed that she knew what it meant to be married. It was strange, she thought, that her infidelity to her husband was her most important thought. Eve almost screamed at Braxton to leave. He would never understand if she shared her feelings of betrayal with him. While Braxton was packing his clothes, Eve was quietly whimpering in bed. What did she do? She defiled not only herself, but also her marriage. Martin was her first marriage of her own choosing. She could never find this perfect blend of man, intelligence, and charm. At least with Martin. She found a man and a brain. He didn't have much charm, but maybe she thought she could work on his charm. Maybe he's not so bad after all. He had 2 out of 3. And he really loves her, she thought. Who else would put up with this damn fool after she returned home after a month's promotion? Who else could help her so much in the office and at the same time restore her sanity after a long trip? Braxton took her hint. Without saying anything, he left her bedroom. She saw his satisfied grin and smile as he closed the door. She knew he would come back. He knew he would come back too. He left the socks under the bed, wondering if the housekeeper would find them and throw them along with her husband's underwear. Martin just got off a plane in China. He was still very excited. His expensive cameras seemed unable to do their job. He was wondering what was going on at home. He wanted to call Eve, but dismissed the idea. It was after midnight in Miami. What would he learn from her? Nothing. Would she say, "I had a great evening and used a young stallion"? He doubted she would be that stupid. On the way to the hotel, Martin now believed that Eva, or rather her security team, had discovered the cameras. Somehow they were disabled. But for what purpose? He could only think of one possibility, and it scared him. If Eve had cheated on him, it would have ended the partnership he had so carefully maintained with her. Trust, honesty, and loyalty are the qualities that he considered the most important in any relationship. His conversation with Eva before his marriage made these moments crystal clear. However, without absolute proof, Martin had nothing but doubts and suspicions. There will be no doubt next time. Martin's visit to China was boring and disappointing. He checked the numbers, the assembly line, and supervised the quality control inspectors. He knew the numbers were accurate. He faked his understanding of flavors and the assembly line well, nodding when he was approached and asking a question or two he got from Eve to make sure they weren't completely deceiving him. But his Chinese owners knew that Martin had no idea how to produce fragrances. He left 2 weeks later. Only Eva knew about his arrival. He suspected that she would not meet him upon arrival, so he was very surprised to see her. Passing through customs and heading to the baggage claim point, he noticed that she was running towards him in a very beautiful red dress, which he had not seen before. She was dressed as if she was returning from a promotional tour, pearls, a scarf, and incredibly high heels. She greeted him enthusiastically. "Marty, I'm so glad you're home. I've missed you so much." She wrapped her arms around his neck and wrapped her body around him, imprinting a deep kiss on his lips. Martin, for his part, was shocked but happy to be back home. He returned her passion in kind. Now he wondered if it was guilt on her part. He pulled back, panting. "I missed you too. To what do I owe this fervent greeting?" "What is it?" he asked curiously. "I just missed you. Can't a wife miss her husband?" she said, pouting. "Of course, and I've missed you too. Let's go home. Martha made us dinner. I just want you to be with me today." Eve's eyes betrayed her when she spoke. Martin could clearly see the guilt dancing in them. The cameras might have let him down, but her eyes were telling the truth. "That sounds great. And what's for dessert?" "What is it?" he asked, raising his eyebrows. Eva grinned with playful eyes. "I'll be for dessert." Eva and Martin spent the rest of the weekend in bed, eating, making love, and showering together. It was just like their honeymoon again. It was Monday when they showered together to prepare for a new day at the office. During the weekend with Martin, Eva felt something she had never felt with Braxton: love. When Martin hugged her, she felt welcome and protected. Their union throughout the weekend only confirmed to her the depth of devotion and care that Martin felt for her. Besides, it clearly indicated how Braxton had used her as a cheap rented mule the previous weekend. Perhaps it was this ambivalence that pointed out her shortcomings. She quickly brushed him off, not wanting to spoil her glow from a fabulous weekend with her husband. Martin drove his Ferrari to work. Eve hated that car. It was uncomfortable, loud, and too fast for her taste. Martin used to drive a Tesla, but decided he hadn't driven a Ferrari until he was gone for 2 weeks and needed to stretch his legs to blow carbon out of the cylinders. Eva called a taxi to go to work. She hated driving Martin's Ferrari. It's all for the best, she thought. She wanted to work on her email, which she ignored over the weekend while showering Martin with love and affection. Her plan seemed to work perfectly. She found nothing from Martin to indicate that he had any suspicions about Braxton coming to their house several times and spending the night last weekend before Martin arrived. Martin was also glad that Eva had decided not to go with him. He was confused as to why the cameras suddenly started working the day after he tried to watch them. He was meticulous and wanted the security company he had contracted with to find out what really happened. He called on his way to work. He gave the security company the key for their initial installation, so access was not a problem. All the staff were free on Monday, so no further details were expected. By late morning, he was informed that the cameras were functioning according to specifications. But the specialist said that today, when they examined the house, there was something unusual. There was another electronic device with repeaters installed, which was not there when they performed their initial installation. They weren't sure what kind of devices they were, but suggested it might be some kind of jamming device that interferes with the cameras. Martin immediately put two and two together, concluding that Eve's security team had discovered the cameras and somehow defeated them. Martin's heart sank. He understood that Eva must know about the cameras. Now he was sure that Eva was cheating on him in their own home. There could be no other explanation. If she had approached him and asked why the cameras were installed, he would have simply said for their personal safety. But she didn't do it. She knew they were there and deliberately defeated them. After lunch, he will start taking some preliminary steps to protect himself financially. Eva asked her personal assistant to have Braxton meet her at her office at 10. Gina has been with her for the last 10 years. Always loyal, she earned more than most in the company. Her devotion has been bought and paid for by Eve over the years. But Gina had already guessed what was going on from the moment Braxton was summoned to Eva's office. She loved Eva, even dreamed of one day becoming like her. But what she was doing with her husband was just wrong. He had no idea that Eve was having fun with people like Braxton, just like she had with others before she got married. Although Gina hoped Martin wasn't completely ignorant, she wished she could warn him about his wife's extracurricular activities. He was always kind to her, never spoke down to her. In fact, he treated everyone the way she thought he would. He was friendly, sociable, and genuinely cared about people in the company. She understood why Eve was so attracted to him. Martin was very fit, clean-shaven, with bright blue eyes. Although he was a little older than her 35 years, she still considered him quite young. She even shivered a little when he came to Eva. His clothes weren't his best attribute, as she was sure Eve had pointed out to him. But Gina believed that there was always more to a person than clothes. The clothes were made by a man, not the other way around. At 9:55 a.m., Braxton was sitting next to Gina, ready to meet Eve. It was unusual, she thought, that Eve hadn't asked him to bring the documents so that their meeting would look more realistic. Surely Eva wouldn't just use Braxton in her office. Gina could be listening at the door, which would probably be closed upon Braxton's arrival. She could also turn on the intercom and pick up the phone as if she were talking. It would be risky if Eva saw that the intercom light was still on. Eva called her on the intercom. Gina immediately replied and motioned Braxton in. He opened, entered, and closed the door. She was still on the phone when the door closed and pressed the intercom button a second time. She knew she was taking a risk, but most of all, she wanted to make sure that something was going on between Braxton and Eve. Braxton, I'm afraid we're going to have to break up. Martin is back from China, and I don't want to take any more chances with you. Braxton shifted in his chair. And if I don't want to? What if I want to keep making love to the CEO of the company? He said it loudly, almost loud enough for anyone outside Eva's office to hear. Braxton, poor thing. I hope you're just being naughty and not threatening me. If that were the case, you wouldn't be able to do it. Eve lowered her voice, hoping Braxton would do the same. Really? What if I tell your husband, my boss, about last weekend? Wow, I didn't think you thought so little about me and my feelings. I think you'll win then. Would you like to use me here in my office? How about right here on my desk? Eve waved her hands across the table. Somewhat stunned, Braxton began to nod his head. You're a stupid fool. You'll never see me again, much less in my own office. Who do you think you are? Please go and tell Martin whatever you want. It's your word against mine, and I can tell you who Martin will believe. Eve said it with determination, but she felt a shudder at her own words. Well then, I guess we'll just have a look, Braxton hissed, getting up and heading for the door. Eva, who has never backed away from confrontation, said conspiratorially, Braxton, before you go, think that our entire affair was recorded. A little Photoshop magic, and it will look like you forced me, practically raped me, especially that first night. Of course, you remember how I shouted at you to stop. How will it look on your resume? You're a fool, Braxton shouted at her from across the room. That's right, and I will be her. But we're done, and so are you. I would advise you to look for a job and leave the firm peacefully if you don't want to take any chances. Eve turned her attention to the papers on her desk as she released Braxton. Gina hung up the phone quietly, listening to everything that was said. Braxton slammed Eve's office door, startling Gina, who immediately dialed Eve's number. "Eva, is everything okay? Should I call security?" "No, Gina, it's okay. Just a little misunderstanding about the direction the company is moving in. There's nothing to worry about. But thank you for your concern. Braxton Peregrine was there. I'm disappointed with the result of the negotiations. If you are sure that everything is in order, can I get you something? Maybe a cup of tea?" "Actually, that would be great. Thank you, Gina. You're the best." Gina went to make tea for Eva. She confirmed everything that she thought was going on. She also knew that Braxton was history. Should she break her trust in Eva and warn Martin? She was torn between loyalty to her boss, decency towards her husband, and the right thing to do. "Braxton stormed out of here like he was scalded," Gina said, putting her tea on a stand in Eva's office. "Just a little misunderstanding, like I said. There's nothing to worry about. Unfortunately, the time has come. I think Mr. Peregrine will most likely look for a job elsewhere." "Wow. I had no idea, Eva, that you knew all the details of what was going on downstairs, even in the finance department. I'm impressed. But why didn't Martin do it?" Eva began to get a little annoyed at Gina and her questions. It was her company, and everyone worked for her. And although she doesn't have to explain to her, it might be better to try to calm Gina down rather than shut her down in this situation. "Well, sometimes when suggestions are given and not taken into account, it's better to nip them in the bud right away, which I did. I saw how the situation was developing and decided to act." "You mean Martin told him what to do and he didn't?" Eva sipped her tea slowly. "Gina, thanks for the tea. I need to go through some photo shoots. Please send Michelle at 11 a.m. sharp. Thank you." Gina was rejected, as was Eva's typical approach when the discussion ended. Gina didn't like it. She left Eva's office gracefully but burning from the inside. How dare this woman treat a good man like Martin like that? It was just unfair. Returning to her desk, Gina called Martin. "Hi, Martin. This is Gina," she said in a whisper, although no one could hear her. "Could you meet me for lunch at 12:30? I need to talk to you. This is extremely important." "Oh, sure, Gina. How about Tres Amigos on the 3rd? 12:30. Yes, thank you, Martin. I'm sorry for such a short time, but we need to talk. Don't worry, Gina. I'll see you at 12:30. Martin was already sitting at a table at the back of the room. He gestured to Gina as she walked through the door. The waitress appeared as soon as Gina took her seat. They both quickly ordered from the short lunch menu and easily decided to share the chicken fajita for two. Martin was curious. As soon as the waitress left, he asked, "Gina, tell me, what was so important that we had to discuss at lunch?" Gina took a sip of iced tea and looked at Martin. He was handsome, but he was also married, Gina reminded herself. But maybe after she tells him everything she knows, he'll file for divorce. "You'll probably think worse of me when I tell you everything, but I think too highly of you not to tell you." Now Martin was surprised and wary. "Gina, you've always been loyal to Eva, even longer than I have. I've always thought that you have the company's interests at the center of attention. I could never think of you worse than the professional you are." This calmed Gina down a bit. She concentrated and began her brief account of her morning meeting with Braxton Peregrine. "Martin, I think Eva is having an affair with Braxton Peregrine. This morning I heard a conversation between them where it sounded like Eva had broken up with him. She said that since you've returned from China, she can't risk you finding out." Martin was stunned. His worst thoughts and fears have now been confirmed. He took a long sip of iced tea, saying nothing, staring absently at the table. Gina was amazed that he didn't show more emotion. And then a thought occurred to her. Maybe he already knew. Before Martin could answer, a breakfast plate appeared on their table. He was grateful for the interruption. The waitress left. The only sound that broke the silence was the sizzling chicken fajita for two in a cast-iron skillet on the table between them. Martin looked Gina straight in the eye when he spoke. "Thank you, Gina." "Martin, what happened to you? Why are you thanking me? I just told you that your wife is having an affair. This is not what I expected to hear at all. Why aren't you angry, ready to kill the messenger, or your wife, or even Braxton?" Gina's voice rose with each question. "Gina, how long have you been working for Sachet Fragrances?" Martin asked, confused. "Recently it was my 10th anniversary in December. Why are you asking?" Gina replied excitedly. but lowered her voice slightly, imitating Martin. Bear with me here. I think everything will be clarified soon. How long have you been working for Eva? 10 years. I've always worked for Eva. Why are you asking that? I just told you that your wife is having an affair, and you're asking me how long I've been working here. I don't understand. In all these years that you have been working for Eva, has she ever had young men come and go at her whim? Yes, Gina replied, still confused. So what has changed with Mr. Peregrine? You mean you don't mind Eva having younger lovers? I'm sorry, I guess I just never thought you'd be like this. I've clearly overstepped my bounds. It won't happen again. No, Gina, you're wrong about that. You haven't overstepped your boundaries, and I will never let Eva have a lover. What has changed now? Martin prodded him. You're married. It's just not right. That's exactly it. That's the difference. I'm married to a cheater who doesn't seem to stop letting men into her bed. And for your information, I don't agree that Eva has a lover, and she knows it. That's why she kicked him out today. That's probably more than I need to know, but I think I understand your point of view. Do you think she feels guilty? I know that it is so, and she also feels vulnerable, Martin replied evenly. So what are you going to do? Until the end of the day? Nothing. I'm not going to do anything out of the ordinary. I'm going to stay in my office and come up with a plan to get out of a very uncomfortable marriage. How can you be so calm, Martin? Seriously, I had a boyfriend a year or so ago who did something similar, and although I won't pretend to know how you feel since you're married, I was devastated. I spent the whole weekend eating Starbucks ice cream and drinking Russian white vodka to drown out my sorrows. Gina, I knew Eva before we got married. I knew about her lifestyle. I can't pretend that I really know her. She convinced me that she had changed, but I still had doubts. She told me that all this is in the past and she is ready to settle down with one man. She said that one person is me. I believed her. I decided to trust her. She is a chameleon. She can change her spots according to the environment. Gina, Martin continued, I know you're risking your rights and privileges today by telling me about this. I'll always be in your debt for that. I'm going to share something with you, but I need your full assurance that you will never share what I'm going to tell you with anyone, not even Eve. Can you keep this between us? Of course, this goes without saying. Gina paled slightly, then looked away as if thinking, but I think I betrayed Eve's trust by telling you her secrets today, so I guess I understand why you're asking. Gina, I may not know Eva's character very well, but I know I can trust you. I installed cameras in our house while Eva was on a promotional tour. Shocked, Gina replied. Why? I suspected that Eva might be having an affair or thinking about it. All the signs were there. Then when her tour ended and she sent me to China for a couple of weeks, I was pretty sure. The cameras could provide evidence to confront her if she was having an affair. What happened? I have to believe that by that time Braxton was already in the frame. Didn't the cameras show what you think was going on? You must already know everything I've told you today. I would have thought so too, Martin replied gloomily. But somehow Eva must have discovered the cameras and installed technology in the house to somehow turn off the equipment when she wanted to do as she wanted. So that phrase she said to Braxton about the cameras today wasn't just a threat. Did she know about the existence of the cameras but deliberately blocked their operation? What an insidious fool. I'm sorry, no offense. I had no idea. Do you think she actually wrote anything down? If you couldn't see her, that's one thing. But maybe she did point the cameras elsewhere instead of just blocking them. You know you're great, Gina. I've never thought about it. This is very subtle, but perhaps there is some truth in her words. I don't understand the whole technology behind this, but I suppose it's possible. I'll call my security company and ask them to take a closer look at these cameras. I was so angry when I found out that she knew about the cameras and had installed the technology to block them that I didn't even think about other possibilities. Thank you. Martin, I'm late, and I don't understand any of this. I need to get back. But I think you've opened my eyes to something I didn't even know about. I can't believe the depths she went to deceive you. I'm not the most righteous person in the world, but I can't sit by and watch Eve take advantage of a perfectly decent person like you. You're just too good a person. I will keep our conversation today until the grave. Gina got up and quickly left. Martin stayed, drank another glass of iced tea, and paid. He was in no hurry to return to the office. He apparently lost Eva because of her little toy, even if she broke up with him. She'll always think she's got the upper hand and she'll get away with it. She could have taken a break for a while to make sure he didn't suspect anything. but he was quite sure that she would immediately return to old Eve as soon as everything fell into place. Defeating the cameras to hide her affair was proof of that fact. Back at the office, Martin listened to the voicemail. Eva informed him that Braxton Peregrine was no longer working for Sachet Fragrances, and he had to prepare his exit package with the help of HR. No explanation. Martin will have to invent them, which, given the circumstances, will not be difficult. 0. There should be a block on the form to insert the reason for the dismissal. Used the boss's wife, he thought. At 5 o'clock, he summoned Braxton to his office. Braxton, it has come to my attention that you are falsifying the company's expense reports. I'm afraid we have a zero-tolerance policy for employee theft. From this moment on, your work is terminated. Please pack your personal belongings and leave the premises. You have 10 minutes. Security is outside to make sure you only take your personal belongings. You're a stupid cuckold. You're only doing what your wife told you to do, Braxton said. I beg your pardon? Martin replied without anger, simply questioning his last statement. You heard me loud and clear, you stupid cuckold. I used your wife, and now you're firing me to get me out of your shitty marriage. You're right. I'm doing what my wife told me to do. I'm firing you. She's my boss. Thank you for confirming that you used Eve. I hope it was worth it, Martin replied again without emotion. I used your wife in a way you could only dream of, and she was still coming back for more. What does that say about you as a man? Braxton was firing all his guns now. He felt very strong, as if he still had Eve. He thought their recent conversation was nothing more than Eva putting him in his place for abusing her last weekend. That may be true, Braxton. I don't think we'll ever know. But what I do know is that you get fired with extreme prejudice, which comes without references and a bias towards never being hired in your field for the rest of your career, due to the nature of the waste of expenses. It is not good when someone from the accounting department is accused of a financial crime against a corporation. And that's all you have? Some kind of trumped-up charge of expense fraud? Braxton fired back, but without heat. Well, yes, and you just confessed to a relationship with a senior member of the board of directors who, by the way, is my wife. I think that's all I have, but I think that's enough, isn't it? Don't you give a shit about your wife, asshole? Well, no, not particularly. And you? Oh, I'm sorry. Did you think you were a huge stud taking her away from me? I must have misunderstood all your rantings. Did you think you were taking away my prize? My prize? Martin retorted glibly. So you're saying that you're not mad at my wife and me because of our affair, and that I can use it better than you? You really are a cuckold. Braxton began to lose his patience. No, I'm not mad at all. Indeed, it is a relief. If you want, you can take Ava any time. I don't think she's ever really been mine. I was just filming her. If you need her, please call me anytime. She's all yours. Frankly, you're just another notch on her bedpost. I'm sure she's already forgotten about you and is looking for her next conquest. Isn't that what she told you this morning? She may be beautiful, but the cost of maintaining her is too much for my budget. At this point, most of the wind was out of Braxton's sails. He decided that he could provoke Martin into a fistfight, which he knew he would win. Which swimmer ever beat him in college as a wrestler? No one even tried. Braxton, one last piece of advice. You should get checked out. Now get out of my office, you piece of shit, Martin said with some malice, although he knew that Eva was probably clean as a whistle. He had another surprise for Braxton. Braxton packed up his things and left the building quietly but still fuming. When he was about 20 yards from his car, he rummaged in his pocket to get the car key to open the car. When he pressed the button, his car exploded into a huge fireball. The car lifted off the ground for 5 feet before settling back down and burning up from the intense heat. Even the car tires were on fire. If he had been a few feet closer, he would have been killed instantly. He had to admit that maybe he had used the wrong woman and angered a very strong enemy in her husband. It was cool between Eva and Martin over the weekend. She managed to put Braxton's misfortune with his car on the back burner. Martin was not himself. On Saturday, she tried to approach him, but to no avail. Martin stayed cold all Sunday. Eve knew something was wrong, and she suspected she knew what it was. She decided not to stir up the hive. Maybe if Marty gets rid of it, everything will go back to normal. She believed that Braxton had fulfilled his promise and told Martin everything about their affair. If Marty doesn't want to open up to her, she has to assume that he knows. Braxton wasn't going to run away in fear from Martin Terry. He knew that Eve would want him back in her bed very soon. He spent the whole weekend reminiscing about Eve. He wanted her more than any other woman he'd ever been with. He couldn't understand it. There was something about the unattainable that he was looking for. Yes, she was married to her shitty husband, but it didn't matter to him. She wanted to be defeated. She wanted to obey his will. He didn't give a damn about his 2-year-old Honda. The firefighters were happy to put the car out of its misery. Insurance will buy him a new car. The police conducted a cursory investigation, but found nothing significant, except for several burnt wires that arced together next to the fuel pump as a likely source of the explosion. Martin planned it. He wandered on. He always did that. He was going to inflict maximum damage on Eva and her toy boy. He was going to take over the company, making Gina the new face of the sachet fragrances fragrance. A simple mousetrap will be his salvation. A simple mousetrap will save his future. But it would also save his sanity. His carefully thought-out plans for expensive cameras proved futile. But now he knew that Eve would never remain faithful to their marriage if given time. Martin had time. At work, he drove himself into a frenzy. Week after week, he worked until he could barely work. Eve clung to him like a tick. However, he remained steadfast and only murmured the usual pleasantries to her. He showed her no affection or emotion. He began to weaken. Eva was so beautiful. It took every ounce of strength he could muster to treat her less than humanly for 6 long weeks, until she finally succumbed to her own desire for love. 6 weeks after Eve's silent verdict, she stumbled. She called Braxton. The conversation was short. "I'll meet you at my place at 6. Don't be late, I need to see you." She hung up the phone after finishing talking. Braxton smiled his wolfish smile. He had plenty of time to shower, shave, and get to Eve on time. When he arrived, all the lights in the house were out. He wondered for a moment if anyone was home. He went to the front door and rang the bell confidently. Eve answered only a moment later, flicking her keychain to mute the cameras, and quickly let him in, closing the door. "Martin is at a conference in Jacksonville. He won't be back until tomorrow, but you'll leave as soon as I'm satisfied. Now get your ass into the bedroom and get undressed. No explanations, no flirting, nothing." It was nothing more than that. He quickly undressed and got into bed, while Eva entered the room with 2 glasses of white wine. She handed one to Braxton and got into bed, adjusting the pillows to talk. "Rules," she said. "You're not staying the night. You will satisfy me and leave when I tell you. Is that clear?" Braxton took a sip of wine and nodded. "Crystal," he said. "Then finish your wine and get to work." "You almost cost me my marriage. I'm serious." Braxton wasted no time pleasing Eve in every possible way. When he was ready to complete the case, he asked Eva what she wanted. "As you wish." Braxton turned on the charm, sitting firmly in Eva. The sigh was audible to both of them. It was like air escaping from a balloon. Braxton didn't waste time slowly building up the pace. He just gave her pace, depth and hardness in various dimensions. She moaned again, which drove him crazy, but he continued his attack. Eve felt as if a freight train had passed through her. Marty was no worse than Braxton in almost every area. For her, the illegal nature of the act itself was what gave her the high she wanted from Braxton. Braxton broke free with the cry of a grizzly bear, which brought Eve to her senses. She was sated again. Braxton apparently had other plans. She had been knowledgeable enough in their previous meetings to understand what would happen next. "That's enough. I've had enough for today. Take your clothes and get out of here." Braxton didn't like being used, although he took some pleasure in it. "I told you. Now get out. I'll lock the doors when you leave." Braxton was seething inside. He had already told her husband that he had used her. This time he decided to check his hand. He really didn't have any cards to play. Stepping onto the floor on the side of Martin's bed, he felt something push his leg. He lifted his toes slightly, thinking there was something under the bed. When he put his feet back on the ground, he felt something metallic touch them. Just as he was about to move away, the clang shook both him and Eve. Intense pain shot through his right leg. He tried to remove his leg, but found that he couldn't move it. He screamed like an animal, the pain was so terrible. His leg was slick with blood gushing from the wound. He urged Eve to turn on the light quickly between gasps of pain. She turned on the nightlight. "My God, Braxton, what is the matter with you? I said get the hell out of my house." She looked closely at Braxton's pained face and realized that something was seriously wrong. "What's the matter?" "I think someone amputated my leg. I don't feel anything anymore." He cried through the pain. Eve got out of bed and walked over to him. She turned on Martin's nightlight and looked closer. There was a pool of blood under the bed on Martin's side. She recoiled in shock when she saw that something that looked like a bear trap had caught Braxton, almost tearing him apart. It was attached by a chain to the bedpost. "What's the matter? What have you done to me?" "Shut up, Braxton. I didn't do anything. But I think my husband did it." "Oh shit, it doesn't look good. Just stand still." Eve had no idea what to do. She ran to the bathroom to get towels to try to stop the bleeding. Braxton was still crying periodically and screaming for the pain to stop. There was so much blood. She didn't dare to move the chain, but she reached out anyway and tried. She took it out to the end and asked Braxton to pull his leg out from under the bed. He backed away uncertainly. When his crippled leg appeared, his screams became louder. Most of his right leg was trapped. The trap's teeth sank deep into the upper part of the foot. His toes turned blue. He saw no way to free himself without losing consciousness from trying. He knew he had to stay conscious. He begged Eve to call 911. Martin's phone alerted him to the camera malfunction again, only this time he knew it wasn't true. He also asked his security company to reprogram the cameras so that they broadcast on multiple frequencies, thus essentially bypassing the silencer that Eva used to hide her illicit connection. He called up a server in the cloud in real time to observe what was happening. He heard the crystal clear sound of Eve dictating the rules and watched his own private movie with his ex-wife. After the fun and games, when Eva invited Braxton to leave, he stepped on a mousetrap. In this case, it really looked more like a bear trap, but Martin decided that it was better to be safe than sorry. A broken nail was hardly punishment enough for stealing his wife, so Martin went with an upgraded module from a local sports store. It looked like the stainless steel bolts and chain he was using were firmly attached to the sturdy oak headboard. He wondered if Eve would call 911 or let him bleed out. Braxton attacked Eve. He was in so much pain that he swung wildly at her. He couldn't move more than a few inches with the chain, but he could tell he was losing blood. His strength was much less than it had been just a few minutes ago. Maybe if he could sit down, he could try to get out of the trap. "Eva, I need to go to the hospital. I'm going to die if I don't get rid of this trap. Give me my phone so I can call 911. Please, I'm begging you like one person to another. We have to get help." Braxton pleaded with Eve. Eve panicked. She had no idea what to do. If she calls 911, of course they will respond, but an investigation will certainly follow. She was trapped in the same way as Braxton. She even considered getting a gun and killing Braxton to put him out of his misery, and then pointing the gun at herself. It was all so unreal. She walked over to her high-backed chair and sat down heavily in it. Eva has always considered herself a decent person. Although she could well call herself selfish, could she let another person die in front of her? She remembered how serious Martin had been when he proposed to her. He wanted to make sure she was aware of the consequences of infidelity. "Trust," he said, "was more important than almost any other attribute of human character. There is no relationship without it," were his words. Martin would never trust her again, no matter the circumstances. They will never have a relationship again, regardless of the outcome. Braxton was sitting on the floor, trying to open the trap to free himself. Even with all his strength, he was only able to open the trap by 1/4 of an inch. He tried hopelessly, each time experiencing even more pain when the trap slammed shut. He almost lost one finger. He was getting weaker with every attempt to free himself. Eva was practically in a coma. She didn't even respond to Braxton's cries for help anymore. She was sitting in an armchair, staring into space. She knew Martin had set a trap. She knew her marriage was over. And now Martin had lured her lover into a life-threatening trap. He also trapped her. She would have to expose herself to save Braxton. An affair would have cost her the trust of the Sachet Fragrances Board. It could probably overthrow her rule. Martin continued to watch the video while the human drama unfolded. He knew his marriage was over. He may be in trouble with the authorities because of the bear trap under the bed, but Eva will not help her lover without calling them for help. Braxton looked like he desperately needed it. He had already turned terribly pale. A person can lose very little blood and still stay alive. Martin thought that Eva still had time to do the right thing. He considered calling her again, but declined. Gina was already out of the shower. He could hear the hairdryer running in the hotel. He was just about to turn off the channel when Eve went to her closet and pulled out a gun. Martin knew she was holding him for personal protection. She took him to the training ground several times a year to stay alert. She was a pretty good shot. He knew that if she aimed at anything, she would most likely kill. She aimed at Braxton. He was almost unconscious. Perhaps she thought she was putting him out of his misery. At the last second, Braxton looked into her cold, lifeless eyes, watching his life pass in front of him. She pulled the trigger, but the bullet hit Martin's pillow. Maybe she was really trying to kill what she was aiming at, but he wasn't there. Martin was sitting on the edge of the bed. He watched in horror as Braxton continued to struggle. He didn't seem to be hurt. A few moments later, Gina appeared in the bedroom in sheer lingerie with high heels, and Martin closed the lid of his iPad. "My love, do you remember when I said that you can run around sachet fragrances with your eyes closed? I know, but I thought you were just flattering me. I was sure you weren't serious, even though you tried to convince me otherwise," Gina replied coquettishly. "Ah, but I really meant it. And now I believe that you will have a chance. It's just a matter of time. Can I make love to the next CEO of Sachet Fragrances? Only if you promise that you will never make love to your wife again. I don't like to share." She answered quickly, "Don't worry, my love. I've been faithful to you since we first became close. Besides, I think she's going to be a little busy for the next 20 or 30 years. The epilogue. The police were called after Martin, and Eva's neighbors heard a gunshot. They arrived in full tactical gear, fearing a home invasion. They all wondered why they hadn't been warned sooner, since the cameras were registered with a direct connection to the security company. If one of the doors had been broken into, the security company would have been notified immediately who would have called the police. The scene they saw at the entrance looked like something out of a horror movie. A woman in a bathrobe was lying unconscious on the bed, covered in blood. She was holding a pistol in her right hand. A naked man, almost dead, lay next to a huge pool of blood on the floor. There was a single bullet mark in the pillow on the left side of the bed. The police had no way of knowing the extent of anyone's injuries. They immediately called an ambulance and firefighters who began to examine the victims. While they were cleaning every room in the house, they were waiting for the rest of the ambulance staff to help. The naked man was tied to a bear trap attached to the bed. Ava seemed physically healthy, but she couldn't speak. The police tried to question her, but preferred that paramedics take her to the hospital. The naked man, whose identity was unknown, was eventually freed from the bear trap by firefighters. They used the jaws of life to open the bear trap and extract his leg. His useless leg was dangling as they lifted him up to put him on a gurney for transportation. By the next morning, Eva had recovered from any physical symptoms. Her state of mind remained stunned. She couldn't speak. The bear trap was considered a deadly weapon. She was charged with possession of a deadly weapon, using it to inflict bodily harm and failure to provide assistance, given the life-threatening injuries Braxton sustained. They also accused her of illegally using firearms. She could not stand trial, and the judge sent her to a psychiatric hospital for treatment, where she remained for the rest of her days. Braxton survived, although he lost about 2/3 of his right leg. He lost quite a lot of blood. He kept saying that Eva's husband had set a bear trap, but this tirade did not reach anyone's ears. Eva was married. He shouldn't have been in Eve's bed at all. The police thought that if he was stupid enough to use someone else's wife, he got what he deserved. Martin eventually convinced the board of directors that Gina should take over as spokesperson and CEO of Sachet Fragrances. She was 10 years younger than Eva and had the right sparkle. Gina was well acquainted with how Eva ran the company. As her personal assistant, she also knew all the people in the industry that Eva interacted with. The board of directors accepted Eva's absence, not wanting their shares to fall. They also wanted to distance themselves from Eva in order to avoid a scandal. Gina proved that she is as beautiful as she is able to manage Sachet Fragrances. She followed their latest fragrance with a new offering. She always wanted to name a fragrance and named this one Secrecy. He also turned out to be very popular. She promoted it in the same way that Eva sold her fragrance last year. There was one key difference. Martin, as her husband, accompanied her on every mile of her 30,000-mile journey. A simple mousetrap, commensurate with the size of a rodent, is indeed the simplest solution.